Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams as co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Good. We're going to talk about another crisis. Can you believe there's another crisis in the world?
Shocking.
Of course, we didn't know much about this 6 weeks ago. I don't think anybody was saying anything about it. And all of a sudden, you know, there's a major crisis going on in the Persian Gulf dealing with Qatar. You know, and these the other nations led by Saudi Arabia are claiming they are the architects of all the terrorism in the world, and they have to be stopped. So now they, put on sanctions. Three other Persian Gulf states joined them, along with Saudi Arabia. You have Kuwait, and you have Bahrain and Egypt, and they're trying to get Jordan and Kuwait coming, to join and continue this. And of course, Tillerson was over there, trying to settle this. But, approximately 6 weeks ago, Trump was visiting in Saudi Arabia, and the subject sort of came up, and Trump gave at least some moral support and verbal support, and probably would like to see those terrible people in Qatar, stop because they're a bunch of terrorists. and then maybe when the dust settled, they realized that that's where we had our biggest Middle Eastern base, and maybe we shouldn't be so tough. And since that, then a month ago, shortly after Trump came back, and this was the first time we had signs of anything going on, even though I think this is part of a battle, of a bigger war going on. Then the sanctions got together, led by Saudi Arabia, and the whole excuse is that Qatar are the architects of terrorism. And this is driven by Saudi Arabia, some irony. But just as in this country, how many things are justified in taking away our liberties? Terrorists are coming, and the terrorists are coming. And even though the statistics don't show that there's a major problem, it's our government takes away our liberties, not the terrorists. And the terrorists, anyway, we've gone over that subject. But all of a sudden, they have to put on this boycott. And some people call it a blockade, which is getting rather serious. But there's a few things that got in the way of their getting what they wanted, the Saudis getting what they wanted, because they're dealing with a country, although small. We have our base there, which is significant, so there's military power there, and that's important. But also, it's the per capita, I think it's the richest country in the world, and they have natural resources, oil and gas. So they don't, even though there's been a blockade, they can't get their food and things in. All of a sudden, there were a couple companies that came to their rescues. So this is ongoing. But Tillerson went over there and was trying to, settle this and get people to come together again. It looks like he left empty-handed, and this is going to last for a while.
And there are periodic blow-ups between Qatar and Saudi Arabia and allies. There's, all sorts of disagreements and skirmishes, but this is the most serious in quite some time, if ever, closest to really a serious conflict. And I think we might count some of the other players, specifically the Trump visit to Saudi Arabia, and the fact that the Saudi king named as his new heir a young and very seemingly impetuous, a very militant bin Salman. And I think the talks between Trump and this young, aggressive bin Salman, this may have come up as a suspicion, and he may have felt emboldened by Trump's rhetoric to really push this further than it had in the past. And as you know, Qatar and Iran, because they share this gas field in the Persian Gulf, they have had some cooperation. Economic relations have taken over for religious and cultural problems between the two of them. They've triumphed over that, but I think that's made the Saudi crown prince even more angry.
Yeah, I think this is, religion is part of this, but minimally, because it's a Sunni country, and Saudi Arabia is a Sunni country, yet Qatar is closer to Iran. But it has, like you say, financial things in oil and gas. That makes a big difference. But, to start painting Qatar as the aggressors in the world and promoting all the violence, all you'd have to do is look in the neighborhood and what has been going on, and Salman coming in, who has been orchestrating, the war against Yemen. And I think it's interesting to see that this gave an opening to Iran to move out and get closer to Oman, so that is an ally. That is a key geographic area right in there. So this may not go away as easily as Tillerson had hoped it would go away. And we're sort of in the middle of all this because we're Saudi Arabia's best friends and we don't criticize them for terrorism. At the same time, we have this huge base. I think we have 10,000 personnel there, and the longest runway in the area. We've been using it to drop bombs on all of the Middle East. I would think that there are some people over there that know where these drones and bombers come from, that they might like to do some damage to that airport or air base. So who knows what's going to happen here? But right now, the dust hasn't settled yet. There's going to be a lot of talk about this area yet.
I think we could almost think about this in the context of unintended consequences of U.S. interventionism, because, I mean, maybe Trump felt that he was going to really strike a blow against Qatar, and get some points with Saudi Arabia by playing tough. But, just as in Iraq, when we were supposed to turn them into Switzerland, they actually turned toward Iran. And the same is happening with Qatar, as you point out. Because they've been blockaded, because they've been sanctioned, they've reached out to Iran, and not only Iran, but Iran and Turkey. Turkey also has a military base in Qatar, and the Turks have sent in more troops to bolster their base. So really it's having the opposite effect in real life than I think what the Crown Prince bin Salman expected and hoped for.
Yeah, and the Turks already sent in 200 cargo airplanes. They came to a rescue, as the Iranians did too. But the one that gave me a little bit of a chuckle was the fact that the Germans are helping. Maybe they want to make a buck on the side, because I don't know if they're into this real big argument that's going on. But they've already airlifted 165 cows down there to give them fresh milk. But they're planning on 4,000 head to go there. And of course, I was kidding, but it may be true. But that's not exactly the best place to raise, cows, milk cows. And I said, well, they'll probably, since they have all the money in the world that they need, they might just have an air-conditioned barn and have artificial grass growing and everything else. But this to me is amazing that if you have the money and determination, you can overcome these sanctions. So that's why this is not going to go away real fast. It just may escalate, because I see this as a battle within the big picture, which has been going on for many, many years, and that is who controls the Middle East. Will it be the Persians, Shia, or the Saudi Sunnis? And even though this doesn't emphasize the religious aspect of this, I think that's really part of it, because Saudi wants to do anything if they have a country there that are too friendly with Iran, and that's what they have found, and they're trying to break that up. But right now, I think the Saudis have made this much worse, and of course, I don't think our government has helped sort it out either. Of course, no matter where we have gone over the last 50 years, our interventions haven't always been very successful. They've been usually disruptive and makes things worse. And like you say, there might be an unintended consequence. Well, there's always unintended consequences, and unfortunately, it takes a long time to learn lessons. And without learning a lesson, they don't change policy. They just hunker down and bear down and say more. If 50,000 bombs didn't work, maybe we need 100,000 bombs. If 100,000 troops didn't work, we need 200,000 troops. Of course, that's the Vietnam approach, and we did that already, in the countries. But here we are building up troops again. So this to me is, if you want entertainment and fascination and try try to understand. There's a lot of different players going on here, and I'm still sort of perturbed, I guess, a bit about us supporting a country like Saudi Arabia, where they don't exactly welcome Christians in their communities to build churches. But in Qatar, there's 14% are Christians and 14% are Hindus. And although it is a Muslim, the official religion, government religion, is Islam. But there's much more toleration, so I don't think it's as much religion there, but subtly the big religion difference is Saudi Arabia and Iran. You know, that's where it's very, very distinct. But that, of course, is being used for the financial things. Who controls the oil? Who controls the price of oil? And that always is a big issue too. Religion so often is used, you know, for financial interests, and then we have to try to sort it out.
I mean, I think the important part of this, I think, is that, first of all, I think it's a big misstep on the part of the Trump administration, a big early misstep, because clearly it seems that Trump went to Saudi Arabia. If he didn't encourage the young crown prince, he certainly didn't discourage him from ramping things up. What do they share? They both share a maniacal hatred toward Iran, as you pointed out. Virtually everyone in the Trump administration is just foaming at the mouth, chomping at the bit to have a war with Iran. And we know that bin Salman, the crown prince, he even said, next war we're going to fight inside Iran. You know, we're going to bring the war to them. Very aggressive. So the two of them share this ideology, and they get together in a room, and I think the result comes from it is something that's very destabilizing, a big misstep on Trump's part.
But the problem we face now is the fact that our government, even when Trump was running, it was very clear they didn't like Iran. You know, that's acceptable, and there's reasons for that. At the same time, we have this base here, you know. So how do you stay with a policy that is very anti-Iranian, at the same time not overly offend our landlord? I mean, we're not there because they need our rent. So that's a military deal, and that's the way it was with Saudi ever since World War II. You know, they promised oil, we promised them protection. That's why we give them their weapons and all these things. So in many ways, Carter needs us. Because what if the armies start marching in? What if Saudis come across the border? I mean, they have to keep us there. So it's an interesting situation that was not intended, but it seems like intervention breeds problems like this and the unintended consequences, and they're going to have to face up to it.
And the Saudis have already overstepped things. They've given these 13 demands. You've got to do this or else. They never clearly defined the or else, and the demands were constructed in such a way that Qatar could not say, okay, we accept it. It was kind of like the deal we gave Milosevic when Clinton wanted to bomb him in 99. You give him an offer that he can't accept. That was what was designed for, and I think Qatar called the bluff, and they said, no, we're not going to do it. And so now it's in this weird limbo where Tillerson tries to go and sort things out. That doesn't work. Included in the demands are shutting down Al Jazeera, the Qatar-owned, the Emir-owned news organization. One of the reasons they wanted to shut it down, they said, is because of its anti-Semitism, which is interesting. The other one is to kick the Turks out of Qatar, kick the base out. And the other end is to turn over all the terrorists, is what Saudi demands. Among the others, those are the three big ones. And they said, we're not going to do it. So the question is, what happens next?
Well, you know, this whole issue of terrorism is the justification for our foreign policy. You know, terrorists, everything they do to us here at home, and why we lose our liberties. Well, we have to make sure you're not a terrorist, this sort of thing. So, and our presence around the world, it's to stop terrorism. You know, and then we get to the point that we have to be friendly with the terrorist groups who's also fighting our enemies, and it gets so messed up. But I want to read a short little statement by Tillerson that he made when he was over in trying to sort this all out, because he emphasizes this. If you use the word terrorism, everybody rolls over.
Yeah.
You mean you're for terrorism if you don't do this? Of course, this is what Tillerson said, and I think it tells us what's really how they abuse this term. The U.S. This is a quote: "The U.S. has one goal: to drive terrorism off the face of the earth. The president said every country has an absolute duty to make sure that terrorists find no sanctuary on their soil." So any place in the world we have to go to get rid of terrorism. But the first thing is, they never define who a terrorist is. A terrorist could be somebody that is a lone actor. So how are you going to find the lone actor who has a beef? And if he walks in and he starts shooting up someplace, oh, is it terrorism? It must be terrorism, and therefore we have to do more. And the other thing is terrorism is a tactic. It's like trying to wipe out corruption. Yeah. Oh, let's get, everybody's saying, you mean you're not going to do this? You're for corruption then. So if you don't go along with this, but it's the justification, it's the emotional justification. It's used all the time with bits and pieces of truth, because some people do get radicalized and they're very bad, terribly dangerous people. But the definition of it, I imagine there are some people in the Middle East, believe it or not, that might just look at some of the, being on the receiving ends of some of our militarism over there, would think that they've been treated, that they've been victims of terrorism.
Yeah, absolutely. And terrorism, it seems to be whatever the U.S. doesn't like. Armed insurgents try to overthrow the Syrian government. If it happened here, they would be certainly called terrorists. You have in Ukraine, you have a bunch of thugs going to Kiev and overthrowing the government through force. That would normally be terrorism, a political ends through violent means. Never call it that, because those are our freedom fighters. And so that's the whole point of the term. But Tillerson's comment strikes me as very Bushian. Remember when he first came out with all of these crazy statements, we're going to rid the world of evil, we're going to do all these things. It's this really vague, strange sort of idea.
Well, I think that this issue that we're talking about right now is an ongoing issue. It's part of the history of the area. It's part of the history of our foreign policy. It's not going to go away. We don't know whether it'll simmer down and the Saudis will cave in, because we do have a little bit of leverage. We're still, they still need us too for military reasons. So it's hard to say what's going to happen, but it can't be that right now things are safer and more peaceful over there since this was broken loose and since Trump went over there and trying to work this out. But how would you summarize this now, where we are and what we might expect our government's going to do about this? Tillerson's was sent home empty-handed.
Yeah, I think it's a foreign policy that really doesn't know what it's doing, because as you said so many times, there's no philosophy. There's no view of America's role in the world. And you had Corker, the head of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Senate Foreign Relations Committee, saying, no, it's the Saudis are the biggest terrorists, not the Qataris and everything. So you have this sort of, misunderstanding or lack of understanding in the U.S. foreign policy establishment. So I think until this is sorted out, until you have an idea of what the U.S. role in the world is, it's going to be more of a mess. It
is a mess. It's hard to figure out. They do things that are totally unpredictable, but they do follow a bit of a philosophy called interventionism. They believe in intervention. Republicans do and Democrats do. It's just that they don't know when and where and how much, and that's why you will have two positions. Most of the time, administrations speak with one voice, at least a little bit better than what's going on now, but there's so much contradiction. But the one thing that is disappointing is they don't seriously ever consider, our position that we should have a lot less intervention, that we shouldn't even endorse the principle of interventionism. We should endorse the principle of national defense without interference in other people's affairs and not being the policeman of the world and not getting involved in the internal affairs of all these nations, and try to work problems out through negotiations and trade. This is why right now, although Qatar is a Sunni nation, basically more Sunnis than anything else, but they're allies now with the Iranians. And that's because there's a little bit of commercialism going on. They both own an oil well and a gas well, and they're going to do it. So the more we do that, but so far it didn't work out. I was optimistic after the Cold War ended. I thought there'd be a peace dividend, and there was. The Russians started selling gas and oil to Europe, and we thought, boy, this is good. But even though that still is going on, the animosity by those who always want to have enemies seems to overcome. And that is why it's disturbing that things could go along pretty well, but all of a sudden we have an old administration and a new administration that have been taught to say that the Iranians are at fault and we have to do anything conceivable, but there are a lot of special interests in other countries involved that like that position. There's pressure on us for being anti-Iran, and that's discouraging. We should be pro-American. I think that is good, and I think we should have an influence by setting a standard and trying to set standards which people would want to emulate, and that means that we have to emphasize the understanding in the promotion of individual liberty, free markets, and sound money, and all the things that could make the world better. Spending a lot less money throughout the world on military weaponry just to finance the military-industrial complex, maybe we would find a lot of that money going into the hands of the people who need to get some medical care at a decent price. Believe me, there is a different system available to us if we really want it. It's available, it's understandable, it's just a matter of getting the message out. But right now, we only have a problem with two groups of people, and that's those conservatives and those liberals and two political parties. They seem to be in opposition to this. They argue over a few details, but they don't argue over should we be interveners, should we have a central bank, should we do away with our deficits. They don't argue over that. That they don't even want to hear. But from our viewpoint, and if you come to this channel and to listen to us, we're going to have a precise position on what we ought to do. It's understandable, it's advanced, it's modern, it's never been truly tried, but we've had bits and pieces for hundreds of years. And when we use these principles, it is a much better system. There's always much more peace and prosperity, and you have the largest of middle class. But right today, we're on the ropes, and we need to address this. And you can't address it in one segment and say, well, there's too many food stamps being put out there or too much government involved in this. We have to look at the total principle of interventionism, and we could start with the most practical thing right now is talk the American people into bringing our troops home and minding our own business and taking care of our own. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.